For years the world only caught glimpses of an enchanting young prince, all smiles and innocence. Yet inside the palace walls an unsettling stillness hung in the air. Staff members spoke in hushed tones. Then one evening, a nanny simply left her post. A royal psychologist eventually uncovered a truth so troubling that it threatened to upend the entire monarchy and tear apart the carefully crafted public image. What secrets have been kept out of sight? Before diving deeper into what this revelation could mean for the royal household, please hit subscribe so you stay in the loop on every new development. At first glance, Prince Louis embodied pure childhood delight, beaming at photographers, cheerfully waving from high balconies, and playfully pulling on his mother's sleeve. The crowds adored his playful energy. However, beneath that charming exterior, a troubling undercurrent was brewing within the royal residence. Palace messengers quietly shared stories of unusual episodes. People who had been close to Prince Louis began stepping away from their roles, citing private matters, but their expressions told another story. They looked anxious, uneasy, and reluctant to say more. One ex-nanny, choosing to remain anonymous, described how, on certain nights, the young prince would sob uncontrollably for long stretches. Nothing seemed to calm him down. She insisted these were not ordinary fits of anger. Instead, he seemed completely absorbed in his inner world during those moments. Official protocol and layers of discretion quickly buried her account. She was far from alone in her observations. Other palace insiders began noting Prince Louis's puzzling and repeated no-shows at major royal occasions. Unlike the carefully choreographed, impeccable appearances of Prince George and Princess Charlotte, his participation felt unpredictable. He might skip events entirely or arrive noticeably delayed. On the occasions he did appear, staff members stayed unusually close, constantly murmuring to him, redirecting his focus, and keeping him grounded. Specialists in child behavior became fixated on footage from key public moments, particularly the Jubilee celebrations. But what exactly needed concealing? They scrutinized every tiny gesture, each glance, each fleeting expression. One detail stood out sharply. Amid roaring applause, Prince Louis displayed a striking emotional distance, only to break into laughter that felt oddly rehearsed. One analyst described this pattern as far from typical for a child his age. It suggested possible sensory overload, deliberate emotional suppression, or perhaps a combination of the two. Even more unsettling was the sudden quiet from the press. Television coverage stopped highlighting his reactions. Paparazzi shots, normally relentless when it came to royal youngsters, were strangely absent. Several journalists later revealed that an unofficial directive, presented as a matter of image management, had firmly instructed them to avoid publishing anything that might portray Prince Louis's feelings in a negative light. Reports surfaced that the royal family had quietly brought in external help. Meet Dr. K, a respected child psychologist known for handling sensitive cases involving prominent families in strict confidence. She had no desire for public recognition of her involvement. Officially listed as an educational advisor, her true purpose carried far greater weight. Over several weeks, Dr. closely watched Prince Louis across both private daily life and public settings, his routines, personal habits, sources of anxiety, and dynamics within the family. Those with inside knowledge said her discoveries left her deeply shaken. The issue wasn't illness in the conventional sense. Rather, the child appeared unprotected in an environment that placed image far above meaningful support. The palace viewed her involvement as a discreet fix. But Dr. K had no interest in upholding illusions. She sought truth above all. This marked only the start of a formal evaluation. Experts in nonverbal cues now argue that subtle clues, like restless fingers and vacant stares, had been visible all along. Why had the palace delayed any response? Or had they known from the beginning? The contrast became unmistakable during events such as the Queen's Platinum Jubilee and Wimbledon matches. Observers frequently noticed Prince Louis squirming, shielding his ears, gazing blankly, displaying over-the-top gestures or turning his back on the crowd. Meanwhile, Prince George stayed composed and attentive, and Princess Charlotte offered graceful curtsies. Many dismissed these behaviors as typical kid stuff at the time, though some now wonder whether cries for help were overlooked. Later, palace insiders confirmed that Prince Louis had long shown heightened reactions to bright flashes, booming sounds, and chaotic groups. In private settings, aides described him appearing exhausted and occasionally immobilized during preparations. Stories circulated of pre-event emotional meltdowns, with participation only possible if specific soothing routines were observed. Allegedly, tense exchanges backstage were caught on live microphones. One staff member was heard saying, "Just keep him smiling." Another reportedly added, "Pull him off stage if he zones out again." Those moments never reached the airwaves. Connections were cut. Recordings vanished among palace personnel. The atmosphere grew strained. Some prioritized safeguarding the monarchy's flawless reputation at any cost. Others felt a deep urge to shield the young boy. Adjustments such as extended breaks between engagements, reduced public outings, and tailored support arrangements seemed necessary for his well-being. Yet these concerns clashed with the institution's deep-rooted emphasis on resilience and continuity. One staff member reportedly remarked that the establishment struggles to address fragility, especially when it appears on someone destined for the throne. During live appearances, handlers were said to intervene constantly, light shoulder touches, quiet instructions, guiding his hands into waves. What looked sweet on screen may have been frantic efforts to contain rising distress. Then came a turning point. Dr. K, originally brought in to support the youngest royal, made an unexpected move. She stepped forward publicly. Her statements carried both compassion and professional precision. She described an environment rooted in concealment, refusal to acknowledge problems, and emotional neglect. Dr. K arrived intending to help rather than condemn. With over 2 decades of experience navigating complex trauma in high-profile households, her initial meetings with Prince Louis were meant as brief evaluations. What began routinely soon became profoundly concerning. Sources close to the situation said the prince spoke in a subdued voice and appeared overburdened. In one conversation, he reportedly asked, "Why do I have to smile when I'm scared?" That single question struck Dr. K hard. He described feeling trapped in loud environments, confusion about performing for cameras, and uncertainty about what was genuine versus arranged. He supposedly added, "They only notice me when I'm happy. These episodes weren't mere outbursts. They signaled mounting emotional strain." Dr. K voiced serious worries and urged senior officials to prioritize therapy and reduce his public schedule, but her recommendations were repeatedly brushed aside. She was told the public expected to see unity and joy. Weeks passed. Reports indicated Prince Louis's demeanor shifted from lively to withdrawn. He avoided eye contact. In one quiet session, he whispered, "I want to go somewhere peaceful, but there's always a camera." At that stage, Dr. K realized silence was no longer an option. The palace expected a discreet departure. Instead, her concluding internal document leaked to an international child mental health organization. The document highlighted a disturbing priority of appearances over genuine care, along with pervasive emotional neglect. It noted Prince Louis exhibited withdrawal in social settings, pronounced sensitivity to sensory input, and intense reactions under stress. While not formally labeled a disability, his responses were described as atypical for his developmental stage. In calm, controlled settings he was articulate and bright, but the intense demands of royal performance triggered unpredictable reactions. Sudden cheers or camera flashes could lead to overload or withdrawal. One powerful sentence reverberated through palace corridors. If left unaddressed, this pattern risks developing into an identity crisis with serious implications for the institution. The child's welfare was no longer the sole issue. Succession relies not only on bloodline but also on projected steadiness and fortitude, raising questions about the monarchy's long-term viability. When a system built on flawlessness faces imperfection in its future leaders, does it choose control or understanding? Internal messages that surfaced showed the palace swiftly shifting into crisis management once Dr. K's conclusions spread. Media restrictions followed, along with stage photographs and tightly scripted appearances. The narrative was being reshaped, with Prince Louis at its center, still waving from balconies, still flashing smiles for the lenses, still shouldering burdens no child should bear. This chapter closes amid lingering uncertainty, raising questions about accountability versus optics, heritage versus progress, and most importantly, a young boy maturing beneath a crown that captures global attention. What unfolds next will decide whether history records this as a controversy, a pivotal reform, or a much-needed awakening. Institutions endure not through perfection, but through choosing kindness at critical moments. If this detailed exploration captured your attention, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. We'll keep digging into what's really happening behind the scenes. Until next time.